Afternoon. Hi. Apologize if you can't hear me. I'll try to talk into the mic as much as I can, but I've been told I'm a soft talker, so if the mic doesn't work, we're in trouble. As you mentioned, these are my accreditations. My roles are many at Plains right now because we only set up the system about 2 years ago, so we haven't had time to grow. So I'm still managing all of the aspects from SDE to Arc Server portal and even some of the development. For this particular project, they kind of hope to have full access to everything. So sometimes it's a good thing, even though you can't get as much done as you'd like. But the challenge in this case was put forth to manage all of our assets and to monitor them in case any wildfires came near them. And so in order to do so, we needed to gather all of the data, both our own proprietary data as well as what the government made available. Each government or each province had its own wildfire repository or their own way of distributing that data, and to regularly update that data as live as possible. There are geoprocessing analysis to check if the data was, or if the wildfire points were near our assets, and then ultimately it was during last year, so economic times were tough, so we weren't allowed to bring in any new products or anything by existing solutions, so we pretty much had to use what we had. And the end goal was to come up with something like this, which is just the wildfire locations, our own, this is just public data, but our own pipeline systems, and then a way to check if any of them were within proximity set by the control center and the other stakeholders. So the proprietary data was easy. We had previously run a project to centralize data into a PODS data model, and so it's linearly referenced. Sorry, the mouse trigger happy here. If you guys aren't familiar with it, the yellow part is the centerline data itself, and then all the other events surrounding the pipeline are scattered throughout the model. So that part was easy. We already had it in place. The public data was a bit more of a challenge, but very suited for FME. So like I said, all the different provinces had their own distribution systems. Some of them were CSV, but even those were at the end of a web location, so any other data set would, or any other application would have a hard time with that. But of course, FME had no trouble hitting those just from a regular CSV reader. And we were able to bring the data in and spatialize it. Some of them were WFS. Again, FME has a reader for that. So it's really easy to use the tool to go and get the data. And again, this one was for BC and Ontario, I believe. And once you hit the WFS endpoint, you can specify which feature class you want to consume. And then again, it comes in a usable format after that. The lat longs and everything, so we could spatialize it. And one of them was in JSON. I believe that was Saskatchewan. Yep. They had Arc Server by midway through our project, and so we were able to consume that directly through the service. And then it came in a little more different, but again, in the end, FME can handle that and spatialize it. There was one that was even a shapefile, and initially it wasn't zipped. At this point, it is zipped. So we actually had another workbench that had to download the files, and then we would go and process the data and act on it. But by the end or halfway through the project, they'd, I guess, received enough feedback that they zipped it up, and we were able to hit it directly within a single reader. And again, common format, so we were able to spatialize it. And that way we could treat all of the data sets as a common endpoint. Now, once we'd actually gotten all the data, we needed to update it regularly. And they all updated their own data sets at different times, so that was a bit of a challenge. But also, the fires themselves don't, stop at 9 to 5. They came and went as they pleased. So we built several workbenches, but you'll see that all of them have similar themes or layout. They each have a reader at the top left where the new fires come in. Can you see my mouse here? There we go. Nope, you can't. So the red part is the reader where the new fires came in. The orange part is we're reading in the existing data that we previously loaded, and then we'd compare them and only populate new ones or update status changes and stuff like that for the fires that needed to be updated. And then we had a little summary report at the bottom that helped us track activity. And so with this kind of a scenario for all 4 of them, or 5 I think, we were able to run it as often as we wanted. We were set it as hourly. There was really no need from the stakeholders to update it any more frequently than that. So it just ran every hour, sometimes no changes, sometimes there were some. And so this was our summary table showing the activity as it happened, whether features were inserted, updated. We didn't want to delete any of the features. We just simply archived them, tagged them as archived, and then filtered them out in subsequent reads. And so that way we were able to audit them or look back on previous fires. And so yeah, that pretty much gave us the live monitoring we wanted without having to truncate and load every time. And so the challenge at this point was essentially accomplished. With FME, that made it really easy with the various endpoints. Data distribution, then, we had it in SDE, so anybody with Arc Desktop could access it, but not everybody in the company has access to that. So we had, for the corporate audience, we already had Arc Server, Portal, and Web App Builder in place. And so we were able to build a targeted web map for that audience to be able to access the data on the web. And so that gave corporate-wide access to it. So we went from 100 users or so that were using the web maps before to over 800 now that, especially since it was right when all that activity was happening around Fort McMurray and everything, everybody wanted access to it. The subsequent, so we had a batch event that loaded all the data, and it subsequently called this proximity analysis workbench. Won't get into the details, but I'll show you the tester is simply where the proximity analysis already happened with the neighborhood finder, and so that one just says, is there any fire near? Then it goes up and finds additional information. If not, it just falls through and doesn't really do anything. The other one is if there is something that's matched, eventually it hits this FME notifier, FME server notifier, and that's where we build out this email that goes out to anybody who subscribes. So that would be the control center, the business development team, and the schedulers, and everybody who wanted to know about these. And so it would populate information about the fire and provided a link at the bottom to allow them to click on it, and which would open the web map directly at the location where the fire happened, and they could investigate further. That's really easy to set up. This is essentially the content of that FME notification transformer, and it allows you to populate the email template with whatever values you want to put into it. And then if people, like I said, hit that URL, they'd be taken to the location on the map where the fire is and gather more information or send people to the field. Eventually, a subsequent step was for them to, they asked us to classify the fires based on the severity or the closeness to it or the status. And so then they wouldn't always send someone out to the field. That was a problem at first. They were like, ooh, we got an alert. So then they're like, okay, well, how much attention does it deserve? And so then we would tune it according to their needs. So in the end, we were able to deliver the requirements with the existing technology. We didn't have to build anything. That only took like a couple of weeks to build. Of course, if you've been to some of the other talks, they talk about, you know, the first one being a proof of concept. It's not really finished until you optimize it, and clearly you could see that all of the workbenches had the similar theme, so you have to go back and refactor, and we are doing that now with some of our colleagues building a more generic updater for all of our data sets, which will eventually include these, but we're not there yet. There eventually was the ask or demand for people to not have to go to their desk to check an email and get to the map. And so eventually we had to go external and allow them to access it on their phone. And eventually we even got kudos from the IT director, sent a message to the company saying, hey, check what these guys did, and here's the link to the map. I can't show you the content on my phone on the web, but people could just click on it and then get at the map that way, and so it really took off. Yeah, I'd like to thank the rest of my team back there. I have a couple of colleagues supporting me here as well, Patrick and Vanessa, but special thanks to Corianne. She pretty much built this alongside with me, and she was managing the requirements, actually meeting with the stakeholders, where I'm busy enough with the back end. I had no time for that kind of stuff, but she did all the legwork there. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.